destination vacation within minutes of you, where the Gulf breeze and sunshine melts every care. Where families laugh and love comes alive. Relax and revive at the Sapphire Spa, Pearl Resort and Condominiums. Laid-back luxury along Texas Gulf Coast.
On Sunday, July 12, 2015, the decommissioned USS Ranger aircraft carrier was nearing the end of its 16,000 nautical mile voyage under tow from the Navy Inactive Ships Maintenance Facility in Bremerton, Washington, having left on March 5th for the 4-month trip to Brownsville. Hello everyone, and welcome to this special Director's Cut studio version of the USS Ranger's final voyage, brought to you by the Brownsville Herald, the Valley Morning Star, and the McAllen Monitor. I'm your host, Priscilla West. On Sunday, July 12th of 2015, from the Pearl Hotel in South Padre Island, Texas, we witnessed the last leg in the final journey of the Navy aircraft carrier USS Ranger. Crowds gathered along the shore as the carrier made its way into the Brownsville ship channel. Like the other 3 carriers that have come to Brownsville for scrapping, the ship was too large to fit through the locks of the Panama Canal. This requires that the carriers go around the tip of South America or through the Straits of Magellan. The Ranger was towed by the 15,000 horsepower New Orleans-based tugboat Crosby Leader, which arrived offshore at South Padre Island before dawn on Sunday. She was towed to the port of Brownsville, where she will be dismantled and sold as scrap metal, much to the consternation of up to 50,000 crew members who served on this ship during its lifetime. Many of these people fought hard to get the Ranger an historic designation, but to no avail. The sight of this massive vessel passing by the South Padre Island jetties drew hundreds of people who gathered to take one last look and honor her after 36 years of service in the United States Navy. During our live webcast, we looked at the history of the USS Ranger and shared with you the stories of some of the sailors who served aboard the vessel. In this studio version, we will be bringing you information about Ranger and her sister ships that you might not know about, and we'll look at Ranger's role as a leading lady in some of Hollywood's most memorable movies and TV shows. We'll also tell you what will become of this storied vessel. But first, let's take a look at what was happening down by the jetties on Sunday.
I went aboard in 1969 as what's called a non-rated fireman. That's about as low as you can be. And I got 1 promotion while I was on board ship during those 2 years, and left as a petty officer 3rd class.
What does seeing the final journey of this ship mean to you today?
It's a bittersweet moment. We've greatly enjoyed meeting other sailors from the Ranger and having a reunion last night, but seeing a ship that was very much alive and one of the greatest warships ever in the United States fleet being towed and all her markings removed and completely sealed up is a little, it's like going to the funeral of a dear friend. You wouldn't miss it because you love that person, but it's not a happy moment. So
well, and we talked a little earlier, and you're talking about a funeral or coming out here sort of doing a final memorial, but you also told me that the Navy likes to personify ships. Can you tell me what that means?
Person, when a ship, a United States ship is commissioned, all of the officers and enlisted personnel are lined up on the pier, and the captain will be at the podium, and he will say, "We now commission this ship, USS Ranger," whatever, and we bring this ship to life. And at the moment he says that, all of the officers and crew in order, in an orderly formation, run up the gangway onto the ship, and they actually for the length of her commission until she's decommissioned.
Well, there's certain things I think only Navy would understand about the importance of a ship, but you were telling me even insights about each ship has its own song and when it was played.
The Ranger, of course, you could play off of that, the Lone Ranger. Our theme song was the William Tell Overture, and every time we came alongside another ship to transfer stores, be it food or ammunition or fuel, we would play the William Tell Overture, and we had a giant plastic or a fiberglass horse, and it was actually an absolute replica of a horse. It looked very real, and we had one of the crew dressed all in black with a white hat, and a mask on like the Lone Ranger. And he rode that horse that was towed by a little aircraft tractor up and down the flight deck. And from a smaller ship, one of the destroyers, the angle up, you couldn't see the tractor. All you could see was the white horse and the cowboy. And it looked for all the world like he was riding a horse around on the flight deck. And we'd play the William Tell Overture. And I understand the other ships got to hate it, but we thought it was really cool.
We'll take another look at Ranger making her way through the jetties in just a moment. But first, let's take a brief look at some of the history behind this magnificent aircraft carrier. USS Ranger is one of 4 vessels in the Forstall class of aircraft carriers. The other 3 carriers in this class, the sister ships of the USS Ranger, were the USS Forstall, the USS Saratoga, and the USS Independence. All 4 ships of this class were completed with angled flight decks, but Ranger had the distinction of being the first U.S. carrier that was originally designed and built as an angled deck ship. The USS Ranger was commissioned in August 1957 at the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, and she joined the U.S. Atlantic Fleet that October. She conducted her initial shakedown, air operations, individual ship exercises, and final acceptance trials along the eastern seaboard and in the Caribbean Sea until June of 1958. She then departed Norfolk, Virginia, sailed around the southern tip of South America, and arrived at her new home port, Naval Air Station Alameda in Alameda, California. It was there in August of 1958 that she joined the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The USS Ranger served extensively in the Pacific, especially during the Vietnam War in the 1960s and 70s. She earned a total 13 battle stars for her operations in that conflict, mainly out of Subic Bay and the Gulf of Tonkin. USS Ranger continued to serve through the 80s and into the early 90s in the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf. During Operation Desert Storm, which began in January of 1991, the Navy launched 228 sorties from the decks of the USS Ranger and other carriers, including the USS Midway and the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Ranger was decommissioned on July 10, 1993, after 36 years of service, and had been docked at the Naval Inactive Ship Maintenance Facility in Bremerton, Washington. There were 2 attempts to save the USS Ranger and preserve her for future generations. In 2010, the not-for-profit USS Ranger Foundation submitted an application to Naval Sea Systems Command, proposing the donation of Ranger for use as a museum ship and multi-purpose facility to be located on the Columbia River at Chinook Landing Marine Park in Fairview, Oregon. However, in September of 2012, NAVSEA rejected the Foundation's proposal and redesignated the ship for scrapping. Then, in August 2014, a new attempt began to convince the Navy not to scrap the ship. A petition on change.org attracted more than 2,500 signatures. The hope was that Ranger would be located in Long Beach Harbor as a museum, but NAVSEA stated that the Ranger was no longer available for donation and was slated to be scrapped. Some of the sailors who served aboard USS Ranger gathered on South Padre Island to bid farewell to the ship they called home during their Navy careers. On Saturday night, the group held an informal reunion on South Padre Island, and they were gracious enough to allow our cameras inside to capture the event. Here's a look at Saturday night's gathering and some of the sailors' memories, as told in their own words.
When I checked the board.
I was going to say, that looks pretty authentic.
Yeah, it's still got a stain on it too from about the first month.
Mine never survived.
My head got killed.
Yeah, well,
You know, I was in a squadron, so I was only on it for 2 9-month cruises. But how long was everybody on the Ranger?
4 years and 4 days.
4 years.
2 9-month cruises, but about 19 months altogether.
I remember on our final cruise, we were in Korea, and they did a general recall. We were all down on Texas Street partying it up, whooping it up. And they had the Marines sweep Texas Street, said, if you're on the Ranger, get back because you're leaving. That was in Korea. You were there? Oscar, yep. So we get back to the ship, and in the morning, skipper comes over and says, well, we have to go back to the Gulf because Saddam Hussein was not abiding by his agreement that ended the Gulf War, so we have to go back there and enforce the armistice.
He watched that guy pulled her. He put that thing on its wing. So when he pulled her, he pretty much be right in front of him, leading him right off the ship to join up to refuel. And that guy could fly that airplane. Unbelievable pilot.
I was in CS
Okay.
signals. So we worked
I was
on.
high sea electricity.
Oh, okay. So we were working opposite ends of the ship.
Yeah, well, we were all over the place. People got in trouble for the oil spill.
I think so.
I remember the captain coming on, explaining that we were in trouble. He said, "I'll tell you how worried I am." He says, "I think I'll have a second margarita." That's all. Clicked off the one in the scene.
It was bad news. The waves were unbelievable, scary. You could sleep through it, I couldn't.
And I mean, just the power. You see this 80-foot wall of water coming and breaking on the flight deck. And a few seconds after you watched it on TV, the whole ship would just boom, shake. It's
Depends
like
on what our load is.
amazing, incredible the power of that ocean.
The veterans you just saw gathered down at the jetties and were among the many who turned out to witness this historic event. We'd like to thank them for sharing their experiences with us. U.S. Navy warships have been appearing in feature films for almost as long as there have been movies. From dramatic films such as Dive Bomber and Operation Tokyo, to comedies like Mr. Roberts and Operation Petticoat, U.S. Navy ships have provided the backdrop for many a Hollywood film. The USS Ranger was no stranger to the limelight. My colleague Ben Trevino has more in this report.
The USS Ranger's most famous role was in the 1986 box office blockbuster Top Gun, starring Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis. The movie follows the story of a young aviator who struggles with his inner demons as he strives to become the Navy's top fighter pilot.
Launch Maverick on alert 5. Get a bearing on Hollywood Wolfman and launch the rescue helicopter immediately.
Daylight raid, gentlemen. Air Force, Marines...
USS Ranger also appears in the 1991 movie Flight of the Intruder. It's the story of a Navy bomber pilot who schemes with a hardened veteran to make an unauthorized airstrike on Hanoi.
Make no mistake about it, gentlemen. SAMs are where your ordnance goes. Otherwise, those B-52s will be dead meat. We can expect a forest of SAMs and flak you can lay down on. We've got to cut a path through for the Air Force. We'll be going in broad daylight with nothing to hide behind. We'll be easy targets up there, gentlemen. But they're counting on us. Lean into it. Let's go downtown!
The Bob Hope Christmas Special, starring Raquel Welch.
Much of America got its first look at USS Ranger in this 1967 Bob Hope Christmas special. Ranger was one of several stops for the legendary comedian as he toured Southeast Asia entertaining troops during the Vietnam War.
Thank you very much. I'm very thrilled to be here on, where are we? Aboard the USS Ranger. How do you get those seats? Are they Republicans? What is that? Even the Jolly Green Giant couldn't hang 10 on this surfboard.
Over the decades, the relationship between Hollywood and the military has served the needs of both sides. Filmmakers gain authenticity for their films, while the armed forces get some measure of control over how they're depicted. USS Ranger's journey into the port of Brownsville could be considered her curtain call. Not riding into the sunset, but with the sun at her back, and nearly 4 decades of memories trailing in her wake. For themonitor.com, this is Ben Trevino reporting.
USS Ranger also had cameo roles in 2 network television series, Baba Black Sheep, which aired on NBC from 1976 until 1978, and The $6 Million Man, which aired on ABC from 1974 to 1978. This day marked the 4th journey of this type as the U.S. Navy continues to aggressively decommission and scrap these ships from an earlier era. Part of the reason that these ships are headed to South Texas is because of the deep water channel that leads to the port of Brownsville, which makes it ideal for these massive vessels. As a result of these efforts, the port of Brownsville is quickly becoming one of the premier recycling centers in the country. There are now 5 companies that are set up along the Brownsville ship channel and prepared to break these ships apart. The USS Ranger headed to a company called International Ship Breaking Limited. My colleague Ben Trevino had the opportunity to board a boat with 14 veterans who rode along to watch the final journey of the USS Ranger that they called home for a long time. Let's take a look.
I was on board Ranger 71 to 74. I was a data systems technician in the intelligence center.
How long has it been since you've seen this vessel?
I was the guy that was heading up the effort to make it into a museum.
Oh, really?
So I've been on board probably 3 years ago was the last time.
Well, tell me about how all that shook out. Are you disappointed that some kind of arrangements weren't made?
Yes, I'm crushed. We had a beautiful spot on the Columbia River that would have been the prettiest carrier museum ever. The main issue was a railroad bridge that we would have had to disassemble, we'd take a span off to get the ship through because it wouldn't open far enough. And we just couldn't make that happen in the required amount of time, and the Navy said, okay, time's up. So, yes, today's a tough day for me, because yesterday we went up the channel and saw what's left of my other ship, Constellation.
Right. Now, this is the 3rd of the Forrestal class that's come here, and the 4th is going to be brought here for the same reason later this year.
And then
so there'll be no more Forrestal class carriers. Kind of losing a piece of...
There's one that's sort of a Forrestal class. It's modified, and that's the John F. Kennedy. 67, its number is. And there's an effort right now to create a museum on her in Narragansett, Rhode Island.
So there's still some hope, at least.
We're going to try and save one. Kitty Hawk could be available. I'm not sure if they're going to find a place on the West Coast to put it. And towing it to the East Coast is prohibitive.
Right.
We'd like to thank you for watching. We'll leave you with some more footage of the final hours of Ranger's journey.